Sally Ann here again with you today, and I'm really excited to have Anne with us on the podcast because Anne has volunteered her time to share part of her journey with food and eating. So, Anne, a very big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, look, and before we get underway, just a little bit about you. You're married and you have a 15-year-old son who has Down syndrome and Crohn's disease. And you have recently graduated as a primary school teacher. So lots happening in your life, Anne. So I really appreciate you taking the time today to share part of your story with food, eating, and health. So to get started, how would you describe your journey with food and eating?
My journey with food and eating has been an interesting one, shall we say. As a child, I was always falling off the weight scale charge at the wrong end. I don't recall ever really feeling hungry. And Mum tells me I struggled moving on to solids. As an adult, I eventually went from being able to eat whatever I liked, whenever I liked, and not putting on any weight to all of a sudden going, gee, I just kind of walk past food and my waistline is increasing. I discovered I had different cravings and I didn't necessarily bother to invoke any self-control. I was in a job that changed over the years. This is before I had my son. And as it got more intense and stressful, and I'm usually one who tries to avoid confrontation, the chocolate box, the fundraiser, was right next to my desk. So instead of approaching someone and potentially having a very heated discussion, I think I'll just sort it out myself and I'll eat another chocolate because, the $2 is going towards somebody's kids going on camp. Got to the stage where I eventually wanted to fall pregnant and we'd been trying and wasn't falling pregnant. So read lots of things, went to doctors, got checked out. And yes, I should do something about my weight, which at the time compared to now wasn't really that high. But I went to see a dietitian to get some guidance. I started going to the gym and exercised. I think I did like an hour workout most days of the week and eventually got my weight down to what was considered within my healthy weight range and finally fell pregnant. Then came oh, you're not eating enough, you're eating for two. And I thought, oh, I'm sure I'm eating what I'm supposed to be eating. So back to the dietitian. Yes, this is the weight you started at. 10 to 12 kilos is your required, the amount of weight to put on. You're not necessarily eating for two, you just need to increase your calories by this amount. So that was really quite helpful. So I had my wonderful baby, lots of dramas there. But within the 2 weeks of giving birth, between doing a lot of walking because he was in an intensive care nursery in one of the hospitals, and so we didn't actually stay in the room with him, between walking and breastfeeding, I dropped all my baby weight within a fortnight. And then the emotional roller coaster started again because we needed to start the process of a lot of surgeries. Having Down syndrome, we had a lot of ear, nose, and throat issues. He was also born with a lot of intestinal problems. And that's when I discovered that I really was an emotional eater because, and I say it that way, but really it was if I was full to a certain level, I didn't seem to cry as much. Haven't bothered to look to see if there's any actually scientific research into a reason behind that. But for me, I just knew that if I was chewing on something, maybe it was distracting, or if I was full to a certain amount, the tears just didn't flow. And it didn't have to be junk food, it was just any food. So after a while, I actually became overweight by eating too much healthy food. And I kind of then yo-yoed up and down for the years. I do remember at one stage when I was really making a conscious effort to try and get everything under control, there was nothing junky in my fridge and there was carrot sticks because my thinking at the time was if you're really hungry, you will eat those carrot sticks. And if you're not hungry, well, you'll have a drink of water. And it worked. So that lasted for a little while. And then came the next sort of operations and I kind of went back into the old eating cycle again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just went on and on for years and years and years.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that because just before we come on air, it was interesting, as you said, you started your life at the bottom end of the height for weight tables, and that potentially was something to do with the fact that you were born premature as well. So it's an interesting journey, and we know a lot more the impact of different birth weights and feeding patterns in the first 12 months of life on our journey as adults with our health and our weight than we did, say, 40 years ago. So that's a really interesting one. But what you shared in terms of that reliance on food and dependence on food for comfort is just so common. And I'm sure you've got to understand that as being part of the Eating For You community, that you're not alone. And certainly other ladies who are listening who are thinking, I can relate to everything that Anne is saying about relying on food to get through stress and avoid confrontation and all those sorts of things. It's just reassuring to know that, one, you're not alone, but more importantly, that there's a way beyond that way of eating, a way of getting out of those habits. So tell me a little bit about what was happening for you when you reached out to Eating for You.
When I initially became aware of Eating for You, it was probably in the middle of the night, I'd probably say. I was towards the end of my degree studying, which obviously involved a lot of hours, and it was stressful. A sick child at the same time wasn't helping. And I remember just scrolling through on Facebook, and I read something. I thought, oh yeah, that could be good. That could be me. And I clicked on a link, and of course life was happening, and I didn't ever follow up until I finished studying at the end of last year, and Eating for You flicks up again. I went, now could be a really good time to try this. And I'm really glad that I followed through, and I actually joined in and participated in a webinar first of all. But what I was hearing and what was being presented at the time, I thought, I think this is something that I need. I tried the calorie counting. That was just too intense. I didn't have the headspace to really commit to that. It worked. Yeah, I lost weight and I felt great, but I just couldn't sustain it long term with everything else going on in my life. I tried the let's not have anything in the house that we shouldn't be eating process. And eventually I think, God, I've had enough of this. And I'd go shopping, and, if I bought the chocolate, it was there to eat, but I'd bought plenty of it, and not to mention the ice cream and the chips as well. So reading and exploring about the Eating for You process, I thought, I think this is what's been missing from my eating journey, not necessarily thinking dieting journey, just with my mental health, my emotional health, thinking all the different triggers that I was becoming aware of through the program. And it was talking about examining your routines or behaviors that you've set up as coping strategies. Are they still serving you now? And the whole mindfulness process, I was starting to try and become more aware of my breathing, and I'd had a few health issues happening as well, and I thought I need to address this. And everything that I was becoming aware of through Eating for You just seemed to tick those boxes for me. I thought, well, it's hopefully going to bring in, because my son's had a lot of nutritional dramas as well over the years, so I've learned an awful lot about food and food science and all sorts of things other than just counting calories. I thought this would be the way to bring it all together for me.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And you're quite right. Part of the Eating for You resources and the program materials that you've had access to certainly talk about looking at all of those triggers for eating, but also the patterns of thoughts and behaviors that no longer serve us. And I think it's really great that you've mentioned that, because too often, and I know you've been in this place as well, but for other ladies, that we align our whole identity with how well we're eating or not eating, our ability to stick to some crazy diet that may or may not serve us. And we forget that these emotional eating habits or non-hunger eating habits have just allowed us to get through a difficult period, of our life. And certainly you mentioned the work stress, you mentioned the illness that you've had, with your son over the years, and the stress that you feel with that as well. So it's really just a coping strategy. It's got nothing to do with who you are or what you're capable of doing when you have the knowledge and skills to help you put your food knowledge into action in a way that actually nourishes you. So what's changed for you now with your relationship with food? How would you describe that?
I think my biggest change is that as I worked through the process, I actually found myself becoming more mentally calm and feeling in control of my eating. So instead of just, oh yeah, whatever's there, I'll just put that in my mouth, I was able to think, well, do I really want to be eating this? Something I became aware of before I started the program. I was eating a packet of potato chips. I thought, I'm not actually even really enjoying this, but I'm eating them, and I'm probably going to eat the whole packet. And, why am I doing this? And so that's something that I've been able to learn to then do as a process before I eat. Like, am I actually hungry? Am I wanting to eat this? Reflecting on how I feel after I've eaten whatever it is that I've chosen to eat, and how am I feeling then? And to me, the biggest surprise was that choosing healthier foods became a lot easier. And having a smaller portion size became a lot easier, because I felt so much better and so much different after I had, say, a bowl of oats and fruit, as opposed to half a block of chocolate. And to start with, it was like, oh, yes, is this really, happening? Is it just a whole gimmicky thing? But after time, I went, no, I'm not even craving those foods anymore. And recently I thought, I felt like some chocolates. I thought I'll just have a little bit. And that was fine for that day. And the next day I thought, I think I do still feel, actually, it was probably a couple of days later, I thought I'll just have a bit more. But that day I thought, I really do feel like eating more chocolate. So I did. And I was fine. I didn't feel guilty about that. And I didn't feel sick. And then the next day I was able to go, no, I don't need any chocolate. I'm just going to have my fruit and nuts this time for something sweet. But it was really great to be actually able to feel in control and making a conscious choice of what I was putting in my mouth, as opposed to getting halfway through something and thinking, why am I doing this?
Yes.
So I think that's been the biggest thing for me, is I've noticed I don't have these cravings all the time, or if at all. Sometimes I wake up and I think, gee, I really feel like avocado on toast. So as opposed to, I really feel like, some sort of soft drink.
Yeah. 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 And I think what you've just shared with us too, Anne, is the fact that there are no good or bad foods when we start eating mindfully. And for yourself, this is something that has been a great learning for you, and you've got a lot of clarity around those foods that actually nourish you, those foods that make you feel good. And that's what's really important. And the fact that when you do choose to eat chocolate, you eat an amount that still makes you feel good. It's not like you're eating sort of mindlessly and then thinking, oh my goodness, as you said, why did I eat that? Because now I feel like crap, So I think that's great to have got to that stage where you're more confident, aren't you, in terms of what you're eating and how much you're eating?
Yes, definitely. And also making, I guess, different choices, where my husband was saying, let's get takeaway for tea. And I said, well, why don't I cook something? What have you got? I said, well, if you go thinking of KFC, you'll probably end up with some nuggets or some chips. And I had a roast chicken left over in the fridge. So I actually put some crumbs around that and cooked it in olive oil. So I figured it's got the good oil. It was a rotisserie chicken to start with, so it wasn't cooked in fat. And then I did some chips in the oven, so just potato again with the olive oil. And we both enjoyed the meal and felt really great afterwards, as opposed to if I'd eaten KFC or whatever brand of food you might like. I would have maybe enjoyed it at the time, but afterwards I know I just feel so sick and heavy and just uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that was what I really noticed or realized, that I think I had turned a corner.
Yes. Yeah. And it is, I think, a number of different factors that come into play for different ladies. Is that one, that there are no restriction rules. You eat what you feel like eating when you're hungry. That's part of the process that you've explained. And it's about, well, when I eat, I actually want to feel well afterwards. So what's going to give that to me? It's not so much about, oh, I want to eat chocolate because I'm not allowed to eat chocolate, or, there's a chocolate there. If I eat it all today, then that means I can be good again tomorrow. It's all of that stuff goes, doesn't it?
It does. And one thing that I've definitely appreciated, that I've learned, is that self-compassion. So instead of going, oh, I had this number of calories to eat today, and oh, I've blown that already because I decided I'd have a burger or something else at lunchtime, and thinking, oh, to heck with it. And then you kind of spiral down, or I would spiral down for a little while before I kind of surfaced and got started again. It was like, it's okay. Did I enjoy eating it? Did I want to eat it? And then afterwards, if I still thought, well, perhaps I did just eat for the sake of eating, it was there on my plate, that's okay. Acknowledge that. And then next time, serve yourself a smaller portion. Or if you're going out somewhere, don't be afraid to order a smaller portion, or take some home with you if that's an option.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's getting more confidence with the amount that you eat. And as you said before, taking control over that in different ways. And I think we forget that, because I know in my home and many homes growing up, once food was on your plate, you had to eat it all. There was no idea that, oh, well, I could have it, for leftovers tomorrow, or the dog could have it with its dinner. It was like, no, Sally Ann, it's on your plate. You have to eat it, whether we're hungry or not. So some of these sort of rules in our head and habits take a little while to break. And as you quite rightly said, once you start getting some strategies around these things, it's quite easy, isn't it, then to eat more in tune with what you feel like eating and how much you need.
Yes, working out why you're doing something, that seemed to be a really big help for me.
Yeah.
And then knowing that I could change, and B, having the strategies offered there or suggested what you could do differently, that's been a huge help. But recently, I think the main thing for me was the not feeling guilty about it, not feeling bad and not going, oh, gee, I failed again. It's like, okay, this is today. How am I feeling today? Getting in tune with yourself. What am I eating and why? And then just really going with it and knowing that some days you might want or need to eat a bit more, and then the next day you mightn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's that flexibility that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, and it's something that we do talk quite often about on coaching calls because I reflect on my practice as a dietitian and obviously my own journey with food. But I remember when I graduated, we wrote set meal plans for people. It may not have been exactly what you're going to eat, but now when I think about it, why did we ever think that we need to eat the same amount of food every day, or that we'd want to eat the same amount of food in summer as what we do in winter when it's really cold and we actually need, to keep warm and have more energy to do so. So thanks for sharing that, because that is a really big misconception that we carry through our adult years because of all the dieting programs and so forth that we hear about and follow, that we have to do the same thing every day. So what you're really describing is that you're starting to tune into the different energy requirements you need each day, which is amazing.
Yes, and I feel so much better for it. And one other thing that I have noticed is that there was always you had to go on the scales religiously. Not feeling that I have had to do that has been really freeing, especially going more like by the feel of my clothes. And I think that's what's helped me also keep to this new style of thinking and eating longer term. Because in the past, I would get on the scales and think they're going nowhere. Why am I doing this? I'm hungry. And then I'd have a blowout and be back to square one. Whereas I haven't been on the scales for a long time, but recently I thought, well, my clothes are all feeling that little bit looser. I've got more energy, just maybe have the scales gone down, and they finally have dropped, which is really quite exciting for someone who used to get the scales day in, day out. So I don't understand how all of that works.
So I think it's a couple of things. I think in the past you haven't had the support to put those eating habits in place, but also your focus was on weight loss as the result. Whereas with the mindfulness approach, it's more about noticing those eating habits, those thoughts and beliefs about food, and changing those. And so once they're in place, you naturally eat less and then the body weight follows. Does that make sense?
It certainly does, most definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and what would you suggest for ladies who are still in that place where they haven't found a long-term way of eating, or they're perhaps still going through that cycle where something might work for a couple of months and then they find their old eating habits back? What would you suggest?
I would definitely suggest this program simply because it teaches you, or it's taught me at least, and everybody's different and may take different things away. But it's taught me that it's okay to fail isn't necessarily the right word, but from my previous experiences, that was what I associated with not losing weight and then, going back to my old ways of eating. So it's taught me that it's okay that if I get to this point and then I have a few days where I don't bother to think about why I'm eating and I'm just eating and how I'm feeling afterwards, that's okay. I can then pick up and try again. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. To me, it's more about a journey of learning about myself, my needs. Also, the impact of sleep I haven't mentioned yet. That was something that I noticed when I had to write down the things that I was doing in the day or wanting to do in the day, and then deciding, well, gee, do I really want to be doing that in the day? And when am I really going to get some sleep? So about examining my life. And when I came into it, I was at the stage where I was able and wanting to examine what was happening. I'd finished my degree. My son was relatively healthy from his various challenges. And I knew that long-term health-wise for me, I needed to make a change. And I tried so many different things before and they hadn't worked long-term. The resources that I was able to access and do in my own time. It wasn't like I had to be at a set place at a set time and things didn't have to be done. I found that really, really a positive experience because I could do it to meet my own needs and it wasn't comparing me with anybody else. I didn't have to keep looking at numbers or searching for how many calories there were in 1 teaspoon of this type of seeds if I was wanting to keep it, really nitty picky. To me, it was like a whole person's perspective, not just the numbers going in and then looking at the number on the scale. I'm looking into the why behind what I was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And the program that Anne's been talking about, if you're listening, is the Foundation's Mindful Eating program. And I never, ever sell this program directly without ever speaking to you first. And if you're listening now and thinking, yeah, I'm ready for a way of eating that lasts, that you gradually build into your life, so you're changing your habits, then what I suggest is join me in a free call. I'll make sure the link is in the notes from the podcast episode. The purpose of that is for me to see whether I can help you. And what's your outlook now on eating? What does the future look like for you with your eating and your health?
I'm finding that my future is very exciting. I'm not tied into specific foods or specific quantities. I've become more adventurous and buying different things from the shops to try. And I've also discovered different ways of joining these new foods that I'm actually enjoying eating. In the past, if a box of fruit and vegetables were delivered, I probably would have gone, oh, great, here we go. Now I'm going, oh, wow, look at the colors and what can I do with this? And do I like it better roasted? Do I want to make a soup? So I think finding another positive aspect to your life and knowing that you can try different things and it doesn't have to be what you used to do or a right way of eating. And it's something I can sustain long term is what I'm really, really enjoying the most out of it. And the opportunity to reflect on the different aspects of my life and how they impact or contribute to my choice of food, and then being able to rejig my lifestyle accordingly. So start with what you've got in the fridge or the cupboards at home and then make your changes. I didn't have to throw everything out altogether and only buy fruit and vegetables and cook everything from scratch. Yeah. So yes, it's been hugely helpful to me from just in these last few months that I've been doing it. And I can see that it's something that I can sustain for the rest of my life, really. And I'm really wanting to learn more.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And I think that's obviously what my aim is with all of the Eating for You programs, is to make you the expert of your eating and your health through the mindfulness-based approach. And it just gives me great joy when I hear, your journey and other ladies in our community that have gone from that situation where they feel like they had no control, they didn't know what to do, and getting to a stage where there's just so many aha moments and joy around food, which is even more important, that I just know, even though the research obviously demonstrates that mindful eating works, it's great to see it happening in our community.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, Anne, is there anything else you'd like to share before we finish on?
I was just thinking then that possibly one other factor that really drew me in was the online availability, because at the time having to get to one more appointment just seemed a huge chore and wasn't something that I was ever really going to do at that point in time. So the fact that I could access your help and the services online and then talk with other ladies, so far it's only been ladies, there may be some men as well who want to come along, but talk to other people who have had similar experiences with the eating, like not necessarily the same life experience, but the fact that there's more than just me going, once I open a box of chocolates, that's it. It's, it's fair game. It's got to go in and that's it. I wasn't alone anymore. And being able to then share in these other people's journeys and hear what's working for them. Hopefully I can offer them encouragement at times when they're feeling a little bit lost or low, because I know I certainly get that back from them and from you. So to me, the online availability was really important at the time.
Great. Thanks again, Anne, for sharing all of that. And ladies, if you're listening in and thinking, yeah, I want to find out more, I will put that link for the call into this episode's notes. It's not a sales call. It really is just an opportunity for us to have a chat and for me to see whether I can help you. So, Anne, thanks again for joining us today. I am sure you have inspired ladies in our community. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
I hope so. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.